So if you would, as I said, open your books to page 27. In the Seafarer. I'm not going to pull up the Old English. I'm not planning on, like I did the other day. So we'll just kind of go through this according to the translation we have. Now, I said the other day, you can read, in fact, I think you ought to read, The Wanderer and the Seafarer as companion pieces. They both deal, I had a marker somewhere. No, I've got one. It's just, I thought I had it pulled out. They both deal with the practice of pilgrimage. And I can never remember how you spell that. One N or two. We'll say one. With the practice of pilgrimage, or as it's called in the Latin, the peregrinatio. Okay? So a pilgrim is a peregrine. And what we see in The Wanderer and the Seafarer is, largely at least, an allegory. That is, in both of these poems, the journey that the individual is setting out upon can be read allegorically. In that, for example, in The Wanderer, the wanderer who is seeking a new homeland, who is seeking a new Lord, one that will not die, one that will not abandon him, is seeking a non-earthly Lord, is seeking a different kind of Lord, which is why I think, that last line that talks about, it will be well for one who seeks mercy, consolation from the Father in heaven, where for us all stability stands, is not a monkish interpolation. It's central to the poem. Because the poem is moving towards this idea of, you want to find stability? You want to find real permanence? You won't find it here on earth. Find it elsewhere. All right? So you have that, and then when you read The Wanderer is much more overt. Okay? The Wanderer is going to make it much clearer early on in the poem that he is talking about a pilgrimage to another homeland. Or a pilgrimage to another home.
Are you talking about the Seafarer?
The second time, sorry, I was talking about the Seafarer. Okay. The Seafarer is much more overt. Okay? I sing a true song of myself, tell of my journeys, how in days of toil I've often suffered troubled times, hard heartache, come to know on the keel of a ship many of care's dwelling. Terrible tossing of the waves, where the anxious night watch often held me at the ship's stem when it knocks against the cliffs. Okay? Just look at the image that's given you in those opening lines. He says, the speaker says, I sing a true song of myself. Kind of like Walt Whitman, I sing a song of myself. Okay? But it's a true song. In other words, I'm not going to play games. I'm going to relate my real and direct experience. And what is the direct experience about? Days of toil. Okay? Life's hard, in other words. How in days of toil I've often suffered. Troubled times. Okay. Troubled times isn't necessarily speaking just personally about the speaker. He's talking about the world in which he lives. Okay? To be an Anglo-Saxon, any time between 800 and 1000 AD, almost any time between 800 and 1000 AD, was to live in troubled times because of the Vikings continually raiding and such. Right? Hard heartache. Well, that is personal. You don't talk about heartache kind of out there. Come to know on the keel of a ship many of care's dwellings. Notice where he's come to know. Heartache and care's dwellings. Care's dwellings. The inhabitation of care. What does he mean by care? worries, exactly. Okay? But where is he? He's in a ship. Not a big three-masted square, square rigger. He's talking about a little small boat. Okay? He shouldn't have translated that word as ship, though I know why he did. Because the Old English word says ship. Okay? But what they mean by ship is not what we mean by ship. We're going to hear why, because in a few minutes, he's going to describe this ship, and you're going to see it's actually what used to be called a coracle, which is a small boat, really not much longer than this table. Large enough for one person to either row or to row with their hands. Okay? Smaller than a kayak, but like a kayak, like many kayaks, a one-person kind of kayak. Okay? And where he experiences the terrible tossing of the waves, where the anxious night watch often held me at the ship's stem when it knocks against the cliffs. I'm wondering if that should stern. That probably should say stern. Pinched with cold were my feet, bound by frost and cold fetters. Cold. Why are they bound by frost? Yeah, this is a shallow-bottomed boat. So water is splashing over the sides, and his feet are freezing. Right? While cares seethed hot around my heart. So physically, he's cold. Emotionally, he's burning up. Nice little juxtaposition there. Cares seethed hot around my heart. In other words, he's out there in this boat. He's got a lot on his mind. So that it's what happens often if you were really preoccupied with something. Do you sometimes kind of lose notice of what's going on with your body, like hunger or thirst? Yes, because you're so trying to deal with whatever the issues are. Hunger tore from within my sea-weary mind. That man does not know. Well, what man? He's going to tell us in the next line. He whose lot is fairest on land. How I, wretched with care, dwelt all winter on the ice-cold sea in the paths of exile. And we have that same exact phrase that we had in The Wanderer. And in the Old English, it is the same exact phrase. Deprived of dear kinsmen. Now, we don't know why he's deprived. We don't know if he's deprived at this point in the poem because they're all dead, because he's been forced into exile, he's an outcast, or if for some reason he has chosen to leave. Right? Hung with icicles of frost while hail flew in showers. So, the man on shore, okay, but notice it's not just any old landlubber. It's that man does not know he whose lot is fairest on land. What does that mean, he whose lot? His lot in life, exactly. How the cards were dealt for him. He says, that person who has it good on land doesn't know. Can't understand. Okay? I heard nothing there where, on the sea, but the noise of the sea, the ice-cold waves. The wild swan song sometimes served as my music. The gannet's call and the curlew's cry for the laughter of men. The seagull singing for mead drink. He's out there, he's alone, he's on the ocean, and he hears all these birds. And this is an interesting poem in Old English for the simple reason it does give us the names of all these birds. It's the only poem that does. And it talks about the crying, or the singing if you want, of the birds. And how does the speaker hear the birds? Okay? The swan song is the music. In other words, the swan's song is what he hears, kind of like Cadman hearing that harp come around the table. Right? The gannet's call and the curlew's cry for the laughter of men. It's an image that he's describing of a mead hall, where there would be music of the harp, there would be laughter from jokes and riddles being told, and the seagulls singing for mead drink. Storms beat the stone cliffs. So he sees the birds, he hears their songs, and you get this continual. What is the sound of the ocean when it's beating a cliff? It's not like when it comes in and out on a nice sandy beach. It's not like Florida. You got to go to the West Coast or the Northeast Coast, Maine or Oregon or parts of Washington and parts of California to hear that thunderous, booming sound as it hits. Storms beat the stone cliffs where the tern answered them, icy feathered. Okay. Where obviously is the speaker not inhabiting the ocean? It's not in the tropics. Okay. Where do we find some of these birds? You don't find terns, for example, in the tropics. North Sea, where the water's not warm. Okay? So when he describes the tern as being icy feathered, he doesn't necessarily mean that literally, that the tern's feathers are all frosted together. Often the eagle screamed, dewy feathered. No sheltering family could bring consolation to my desolate soul. He thinks of the eagle, he thinks of the tern and all these other animals, all these other birds, and notice, he's alone. The birds have each other, as it were, because the implication is, there's a tern, there's a tern, a single tern, a single curlew, a single gannet, etc. No sheltering family could bring consolation to my desolate soul. Notice, it's not just no family. It's no sheltering family. How do families shelter? Now, you could interpret that as meaning no family in a house. But how else? Emotionally, like a hen with its chicks, covering them with its wings. It's not an accident that you get that sheltering right after all the bird imagery. How does a bird protect its young? Covers them with its wings. Or, if it's a penguin, wouldn't have known this, it sits on them. Okay? And so, he who has tasted life's joys in towns. Similar phrase to he who has known, the fairest lot on earth, or on the land. He who has tasted life's joy in towns, suffered few sad journeys, scarcely believes, proud and puffed up with wine. Proud there doesn't mean arrogant. It doesn't mean hubristic, okay? It means essentially drunk. Drunk and puffed up with wine. He scarcely believes what I, weary or tired, have often had to endure in my seafaring. The person who has never experienced life on the sea, he says, will find it difficult to believe what I've experienced. And then he's going to go on and give us more description of what he's experienced. The night shadow darkened. The Old English there is the nicht shua, right? Which is a really beautiful image when you understand Anglo-Saxon. Because this obviously is night. Okay? This is darkening. The darkening at night darkened. It's like saying the blackness of night got even blacker. So imagine pitch black and then make it even more pitch black. Snow came from the north. Frost bound the ground. Hail fell on earth, coldest of grains. It's not springtime. It's not, shall I compare thee to a summer's day, like Shakespeare's Sonnet 20. No. And so they compel me now. Now, look down at your footnote. The repeated connecting word forthon is notoriously difficult in this poem. It's the word that Roy Liuza keeps translating as and so. Forthon can mean a whole bunch of different things. It can mean because, since, and so, thus, therefore. It's one of the words that gives graduate students a whole lot of difficulty when they're first learning to translate Old English. It points forwards and or backwards, meaning either therefore or thus or because. In a poem in which a logical progression is by no means clear or easy to follow, this is a significant source of ambiguity. When he talks about the logical progression, he means in a poem like this, where it's hard to see where he is saying, and on account of what came before, therefore, because it doesn't always work that way. Okay? Rendering it with the vague and so preserves some of the interpretive difficulty found in the original. Or it could be just his way of saying, I don't know how to translate here, so I'm just going to use the least offensive way as I can. And so they compel me now. What's the they? It's looking forward. My heart thoughts. The thoughts of his heart compel him now to do what? To try for myself the high seas. To try. What does he mean by to try?
To face.
Louder. To face. What else?
To keep going.
To keep going. To test. It's to test for himself the high seas. In other words, this is a test not of the high seas. It's a test of himself. Okay? He is trying to use another word related to test that we don't think of anymore. Why? Because this meaning of test and try, and the other word I'm going to use, all come from the world of alchemy. To prove himself. Okay? It can be thought of as trial. Yeah. Okay. So, to try for myself the high seas, the tossing salt streams. My heart's desire urges my spirit again to travel, so that I might seek far from here a foreign land. Notice, he's just told us why he's in exile, why he treads the paths of exile. He chooses to. Okay? He's not a forced outcast. He chooses this. Why? To try, to test himself. Okay? This becomes for him. Let me leave those up here. I'm using an old Greek form of word. And ascesis, okay, or an ascetic feat, F-E-A-T. A feat, something to endure. Ascetic. What is an ascetic? Well, usually if you ask who is an ascetic, a monk or a nun. Someone who denies the world, who denies the pleasures of this life, okay, usually to try to get closer to God. Doesn't matter which God, because you have Tibetan monks and Buddhist monks and, all different kinds. So he says, so no man on earth is so proud in spirit, nor so gifted in grace, or so keen in youth, nor so bold in deeds, nor so beloved of his Lord. Now, look at all those little phrases. No man on earth is so proud in spirit, so gifted in grace, so keen in youth, so bold in deeds, so beloved of his Lord, that he never has sorrow over his seafarer. In other words, everyone who journeys, as he's talking about, suffers. So is he talking only about seafaring? Going out on a boat? Okay, if he's not, what does seafaring represent?
The test.
Say it again.
The test or the journey that he's on.
The test or the journey that he's on. What might that journey be? Life? To draw closer to God. What else might the journey be? Any of you familiar with trying to remember the poem? Emily Dickinson's Because I Could Not Stop for Death?
Yes.
What did he do? He stopped for me. Okay. Might the journey, might the seafaring be death? I mean, think of those lines again. No man on earth is so proud in spirit, so gifted in grace, so youth, so bold in deeds, nor so beloved of his Lord, that he never has sorrow over his seafaring. If you read there the seafaring as the journey through death, what does that mean? No one is so spiritually perfected that they don't have some angst over death. Okay? What he sees, that he never has sorrow over his seafaring, when he sees the Lord might have in store for him. Now it seems to me that when you add that second line, when he sees what might have in store for him, that kind of makes clear what the seafaring is. Because Lord there in this is capitalized. I can't do that because I closed Firefox. I was going to see what it is in the Old English. I'm almost positive that it reads Dickinson with the D capitalized in the Anglo-Saxon, in the Exeter manuscript. Okay? The Wanderer and the Seafarer, I mentioned the other day the 4 manuscripts. The Wanderer and the Seafarer both come from the Exeter manuscript, all right, which is at Exeter Cathedral in England, and it's a wonderful manuscript because of what it contains. It contains a lot of religious poetry, but it also contains all of the known Anglo-Saxon riddles, about 90 of them. Some of them are pretty easy. Some of them have never been solved. I mean, people have proposed solutions, but there's by no means kind of a unanimous consent. And some of them are just downright dirty, which is, the wonderful thing about riddles, is they can have a solution that on one level makes perfectly good sense and it's clean, but on another level, totally inappropriate, let's say, especially when you think that the Exeter book was probably kept at a monastery, and it's a bunch of monks sitting around, telling these dirty jokes, essentially. Okay, so he has no thought, that is, the one who goes on a seafaring, when he thinks about what the Lord will have in store for him, he has no thought of the harp or the taking of rings. In other words, he doesn't think back to what I said the other day, was the center of Anglo-Saxon society. He doesn't look back to the hall, nor the pleasures of woman, or joy in the world. Okay, so notice that. He doesn't think of the harp. Well, the harp is merely a symbol that here represents human society, human joy, or the taking of rings, the gift-giving exchange with the Lord, the pleasures of woman, sex, or, and then to kind of subsume all of those together, joy in the world. Yes?
I'm sorry, but Is he basically trying to say that you can't enjoy your life without knowing the comfort that will come after life?
Hold that thought. Wait till we get to the end, and we'll come back to it. Okay? So he has no thought of the harp, or the taking of rings, nor the pleasures of woman, or joy in the world, nor anything else but the tumbling waves. He always has longing who hastens to see. Right? That is, the person who willingly gives up, willingly turns his back on all the pleasures of the hall. Okay? Singing, drinking, sexing? No. Whoring, wine, women, and song. I mean, that's essentially what he's talking about here. Who willingly gives that up, he says he can't think about those things. He who always has longing, who hastens to the sea. In other words, he has longing because these don't fulfill. Do they not give joy? No, they give joy. But it's not a joy that lasts, the speaker is suggesting. The groves take blossom. He's talking about the groves on land, obviously. The cities grow fair. The fields brighten. The world rushes on. That is, it's a depiction of springtime. Winter has gone. All of these, what? The blooming trees, the cities growing fair, the brightening fields. All of these, he says, urge the eager-hearted spirit to travel. Why? Okay, look at that clause. The world rushes on. In other words, he sees every year the trees blossom, the fields grow, time moves on. All these urge the eager-hearted spirit to travel when one has a mind to journey far over the floodways. It's almost like he's saying, time is running short. Better get ready. Because I could not stop for death, death stopped for me. I could not stop for death. Why? Too much stuff going on. So, okay, Rhett Butler shows up in his carriage. Even the cuckoo urges with its sad voice. Summer's guardian announces sorrow bitter in the breast hoard. Okay? Bitter in the breast hoard. The breast hoard is the heart. Hoard there means treasure chest. Okay? He says the cuckoo, even its song is melancholy. The cuckoo song, which is sung not necessarily early springtime or late fall, it's sung at the height of summer, when everything is green and beautiful and full of life. The speaker is suggesting the cuckoo song suggests winter's coming, death is coming. He does not know is the cuckoo. He does not know who, the man blessed with ease, what those endure who walk idly in the paths of exile. Notice he keeps saying things like that. The person who's phrased, fat, dumb, and happy here on earth has no idea what those who tread the paths of exile endure. Okay? Now keep in mind, generally, who is he speaking about when he talks about those who tread the paths of exile? He's not forced outcasts. He's talking about others like himself. Others who deny all this, who turn on all this. They don't turn their backs on all this because it's bad. Okay? They turn their backs on all this in order to do this, to try themselves, to test themselves, to purify themselves. Try and test, improve, and then purify. I said earlier, try, test, and prove are all alchemical words. Because what is the basic goal of alchemy? Anybody know? Transformation. Thank you for using that word. Transformation. It's usually thought, oh, well, it's just, to turn base metal into gold. Okay. Yes, on a base level. On a deeper level, it's not about turning lead into gold. It's about turning me into gold. Not literally. It's about transforming the alchemist into something pure and eternal. Okay. Which is why throughout the Middle Ages, almost all alchemists were Christian. Because alchemy was a Christian idea. Okay? The transformation of something rotten and sinful into something pure and holy. Okay? So, that's what the ascetic feat is all about. Because getting closer and closer to God means getting holier and holier. And so, now my thought flies out from my breast, my spirit moves with the sea, roams widely over the whale's home. And this is kind of weird because this is like an ecstatic experience. An ecstasy. Okay? What is an ecstasy? It is an out-of-body experience. It's an old Greek notion that there are times when one can enter a trance-like state and send one's soul out of the body to experience something else. Okay? Shirley MacLaine, would call it an astral projection. And so my thought flies out from my breast, my spirit moves with the sea flood, roams widely over the whale's home, that's the ocean, that's a kinning, to the corners of the earth, and comes back to me greedy and hungry. Well, he sends his thought out like a bird, and it travels over the ocean, and it comes back greedy and hungry. What do we have an image of there? Yeah, Noah's Ark. What does Noah first do after the rain stops? He opens the window and sends out a bird. I don't remember, it's a raven, I think. And the bird goes off, or a pigeon or a dove, something, and it comes back. Why? Nowhere to land. He does it again 7 days later, and it brings back an olive branch. He does it again, and it doesn't return. So he knows there's now. Okay. The thought comes back. Why? The implication is that there's no ground here, meaning the four corners of the earth, to settle. This isn't home. The lone flyer cries out, incites my heart irresistibly to the whales of the open sea. Because hotter to me are the joys of the Lord than this dead life. That's that word we saw in The Wanderer. Lana, lean, loaned on land. Right? Hotter to me are the joys of the Lord than this dead life. Why is this life dead? Back to The Wanderer, what does it result in? It results in here wealth is fleeting, here friends are fleeting, here man is fleeting, here woman is fleeting. All the framework of this earth will stand empty. In other words, what will everything this plot get you? A plot. 6 feet of ground. That's what it will get you. So, He says the joys of the Lord are hotter than that. I will never believe that goods will endure forever. Here, wealth is fleeting. Here, always, for everyone, one of three things before its due time. That is, before it reaches its end, let's say. So, for everyone, one of three things will happen. One of three things will happen. Mentally. So what are the three things? Or age, or attacked by the sword, wrests life away from one doomed. Okay, and the word there that is translated doomed is phytha, if I remember correctly, which is related to the word for feud. Okay, what does he say? Okay, when he says, for the one doomed to die, well, I hate to blow any bubbles, but we're all doomed to die. And we'll die. Okay? And what he's saying is, you get three choices. You can die by illness, by old age, or you can die by the sword. Okay? That's pretty much it. And so for every man the praise of posterity, those coming after, is the best eulogy. For every man, the praise of those coming after. He doesn't just mean, at the memorial service, yeah, well, I knew Fred, he was a good person, blah, blah. He doesn't mean that. What kind of praise is he talking about? Fame, glory. That people will have known you lived. You existed. It's essentially what Frank Capra's great film, It's a Wonderful Life, is all about. If you remember the film, Jimmy Stewart's character, George Bailey, thank you. I was going to say Harry Bailey, but that's the host in Chaucer's Canterbury Tales. Be good too. George Bailey, has this existential moment where he's thinking, my life would be better if it had never been. The world would be better if I had never existed. And so Clarence's angel takes him off and shows him what life would be like if he had never existed. Okay? And he comes to see, wow, I affected a lot of people. That's what this line is about. For every man, the praise of posterity, those coming after, is the best eulogy. That before he must be on his way, in other words, before death stops for you, what? He act bravely on earth against the enemy's malice. Do bold deeds to beat the devil. Well, how do you do bold deeds to beat the devil? This way. This is a way, essentially, of tempting the devil. Of saying, I'm going to give up all those things that you want to use to tempt me. And I'm going to go after God. And the devil's going to go, oh yeah, buddy. I mean, if you read the history, I'm teaching a course now that I developed called, what is that course called? Early Christian Literature of the Middle East. And if you study the early period of the church, especially the beginning of monasticism with St. Anthony the Great in Egypt, I mean, what you see in all the examples are these monks and nuns who go off to live either in small groups or by themselves, usually in a desert. Okay? If there's not a desert, then wherever they go becomes their desert. Here, the sea is the desert, okay, because it's an isolated place. They go off and they, quote unquote, do battle against the devil or against demons. Well, how do they do that? Not because they have a spiritual sword of truth and, they're duking it out, Count Dooku and Yoda ways. They do that through prayer and fasting. Okay? And while, in terms of what we get in terms of lives of the saints and things like that, while they pray, they're being assaulted. Example of St. Anthony of Egypt, the assaults take both spiritual form, doubt and things like that, and physical form. St. Athanasius, who wrote St. Anthony's biography, talks about him one time coming out of his cell just bruised and battered and bloody because the demons were wailing on him all night long, okay, while he was in prayer. So that's what he's talking about. Before he must be on his way, that is, before he dies, he act bravely on earth against the enemy's malice. Do bold deeds to beat the devil. Why? So the sons of men will salute him afterwards. Why will they salute him? It doesn't mean, Kyle. It means they will look to him, okay, as a model. They will praise him. We have in Anglo-Saxon literature this poem called Guthlac A and B. Okay, Guthlac was the name of an Anglo-Saxon saint. And what these two poems, which are essentially a poetic life of the saint, what these two poems recount are some of Guthlac's bold deeds to beat the devil. Here's one of them that he used to do. He would go off, I think it was the northeast coast. He would walk out into the ocean, okay, North Sea, between England and northern coast of Europe. He would walk out to the sea so the water was up to about his neck and stand there for hours and pray. For the sin to subdue, as he put it, to subdue his body, to teach his body it did not have control over his spirit. Not because he said the body was bad, not at all, but because he is trying to teach the body it was subservient to the soul. Because after all, think about this. What is a body without a soul? A corpse. It's a carcass. It's, meat for bugs and birds and such. What is a soul without a body? It's still a soul. It still exists. Yeah, the body exists, but it's not going to get up and okay? The soul can still sing and dance. It's not that one is better than the other. They go together, kind of an idea. But, as everybody in here, I think, knows, sometimes the body kind of takes control, right? Why do you get drunk? Because the body wants to, not because the soul wants to. Why do you eat too much? Not because, you're trying to fill the soul. It doesn't work that way, okay? Why do you not want an exercise program? Because it hurts. Because it's tiring. Because, why do you take the elevator rather than the stairs? Because it's easier. It lifts you up rather than you having to come all the way up 5 or 3 flights of stairs. Okay? So, after that line, so the sons of men will salute him afterwards, and his praise thereafter live with the angels forever, the joy of eternal life, delight among heaven's hosts. His praise will live with the angels. What praise? What's the greatest praise, if you're familiar with the New Testament, that can be given to someone? I think it is one of St. Paul's letters. Exactly. Well done, thou good and faithful servant. Okay? Light among heaven's hosts. What's the popular conception of heaven? Or a misconception, if you want, or, parody. People sitting up there on the little white clouds with their little harp going, yeah, praise Jesus. This is so freaking boring. That's kind of it. Here in this poem, we're going to get another depiction. Okay? It is of Mead Hall Revelry. Good word, revelry. It kind of means no holds barred, just have. And we'll see that by the time we get to the end. The days are lost in all the pomp of this kingdom. Okay? There are now neither kings, nor emperors, nor gold givers, as there once were. Now, that could be taken as a slap in the face to whoever the current king was. What's he saying? Where are, put it in a modern context, where are our modern day equivalent of the founders? Where is George Washington? Where is Tom Jefferson? Where is Ben Franklin? Where is Patrick Henry? Where is down the list? Because most people would say, haven't seen their likes in, about 230 years. Okay? There are now neither kings, nor emperors, nor gold givers as there once were, when they did the greatest glory and lived in most lordly fame. He's talking about people like, possibly, Charlemagne. Because Caesar, at this period of time, was well regarded. You know, Shakespeare hadn't come around and written his play. Dirty his name, as it were. All this noble host is fallen. All the great kings and heroes and warriors are dead. Their happiness lost. The weaker ones remain and rule the world, get what they can with toil. The weaker ones remain. And if I remember correctly, the word there that's used for that weaker is weirser. There's a huge difference between worser, or what we would call worst, and weaker. Weak is physically weak. Worse implies what? Morally worse. Okay? And what do? The weaker ones remain and rule the world and get what they can with toil. You familiar with Jordan, God's Grandeur, where he talks about people toil, and they cover with men's toil, and he says, yet for all that, God's grandeur will not be out, etc. So, joy is laid low. Beautiful image. What does it mean? It's not joy. The earth's nobility grows old and withers. The nobility, its aristocracy, it's powerful. They grow old and wither. Every man throughout Middle Earth. Okay. This is life, the speaker is saying. J.R.R. Tolkien, in his essay, Beowulf, the Monsters, and the Critics, which we'll talk about more when we get to Beowulf, said that all of old literature is essentially about one theme: the death of man and all his works. Period. Not the glory of humanity's creations. That's implied in the works. It's about the death of all people and everything they do. It does not last. That is the overarching, take it back, not the overarching. That is the underpinning mentality behind everything Tolkien writes also. The Hobbit, Lord of the Rings, Silmarillion. Okay? If you don't understand that, you cannot understand the Lord of the Rings, which is why Peter Jackson has no clue when it comes to the Lord of the Rings or the Hobbit. Old age overtakes him. His face, the gray beard, grieves. He knows his old friends, offspring of princes, have been given up to the... They've all died. When life fails him, his fleshly cloak will neither taste the sweet nor touch the sore. In other words, what's going to happen to his body? In the ground it goes. Nor move a hand, nor think with his mind. Though a brother may wish to strew his brother's grave with gold, bury him among the dead with myriad treasures to take with him, will be useless before the terror of God for the soul that is full of sin. The gold he had hidden while he lived here on earth. It was standard Germanic practice, especially before the coming of Christianity, that when a lord died, a king died, he would be buried with all kinds of treasure. You know, I mentioned the Sutton Hoo burial the other day. Sutton Hoo is thought to have been what's called a cenotaph. That is, it's a commemoration of someone, but the body buried there. But to commemorate whoever it was that was commemorated, they buried a boat that was 2 miles from the nearest river. And in order to get that boat from the nearest river, they had to up the river. Then they had to push the boat on rollers about a mile up a hill, and then another mile on level land. Then they had to dig a hole to bury it. And I'm not talking a little boat. It's not, 30 feet the width of this room. This sucker's 9 feet long. This is like a Viking longship. And the whole boat was buried. The mound that they found in was, if I remember right, about 30 feet tall. Okay? And at the Sutton Hoo site, there's a whole bunch of these mounds. Like 30 of them. 25 or 30 of them. Each one a burial mound. Okay? With stuff in it before they'd been robbed and such. Well, what's going on there? People are being buried, or in this case commemorated, with all kinds of treasure. And all the anthropologists say, oh, it's for the afterlife journey, we put stuff down there and they'll take it on, No, it's not. It's to show honor, respect, etc. for the dead person. And here says, what good will it do? Great is the terror of God. The earth trembles before. He established the sturdy foundations, the earth's solid surface, and the high heavens. In other words, God made everything. Foolish is he who dreads not the Lord. Okay? Death will find him unprepared. Because I could not stop for death. Oops. Okay? So what is he talking about? The one who doesn't do this. Now, he's not saying he needs to be a monk. But he is saying everybody's got to prepare to die. Death will find him. Blessed is he who lives humbly. That mercy comes to him from heaven. In other words, that's how you prepare to be humble. The Maker strengthens, that mercy comes to him from heaven. The Maker strengthens his spirit. He believes in his might. A man must steer a strong mind and keep it stable. Remember the passage we talked about Tuesday? It was about boasting. Don't make a boast until you know what way your heart will go when the time comes to fulfill the boast. Don't say, oh yeah, I'm going to take on Brindle. And then Grendel comes in and he's this 80-foot monster with big long claws, and you go, yikes, run away. A man must steer a strong mind and keep it stable, steadfast in its promises, pure in its ways. Every man must hold in moderation his love for a friend and his hatred for a foe. Why? Why be moderate about love for a friend and hatred for a foe? Well, one reason is because here, friends are loaned. You wake up one day, and what does your friend become? Unfriendly. You have an argument. You wake up one day, and what does your enemy become? Your unenemy. Okay? His love for a friend, his hatred for a foe, though he may wish him fire, or his friend consumed. And notice the ... at the end of the one line, beginning of the next line, the manuscript's damaged there. Okay? Or his friend consumed on a funeral pyre. Fate is greater. By the way, I don't know why he translated it fate there, but not earlier in The Wanderer as fate. Fate is greater, a maker mightier than any man's thoughts. In other words, only God knows what's going to happen to your friend and to your foe. Let us consider where we should have our home, where we want to travel to, and then think how we may come there. And let us also strive to reach that place of eternal blessedness where life is found in the love of the Lord, hope in heaven. Thanks be to the Holy One that he has so honored us, ruler of glory, eternal Lord, eternal Lord. I guess he is external too, transcendent and immanent, throughout all time. All right? The image of heaven here, as I said, is this. It is I'm going to use a term C.S. Lewis might have used. It is a baptized Valhalla. Everybody know what Valhalla is? Okay. The Val there is whale. It's the whale hall, not orca whale. Okay. Whale meaning dead. It's the hall of the dead. In Norse mythology, Valhalla is where Brunhild, sister, Valkyries, okay, bring all the dead warriors. And they sit around, not for eternity, but for almost eternity. They sit around in this great big hall and throw back mead and drink, sing, and fight, and drink and sing and fight, until the end of the world, when Ragnarok comes. And when Ragnarok comes, Brunhild and the Valkyries and all the dead warriors come back down to earth for the one great big final cataclysmic battle. The frost giants, the dwarves, the elves, the Orkneys, things like that. And they lose. The giants and all the bad guys win. Chaos win. Okay? So, when I say it's a baptized Valhalla, take the image of Odin and Thor and Frigg, all these, gods, sitting there just drinking tankards of ale and Christianize it. Well, if you're familiar with the New Testament, what's the image? It's the wedding supper of the Lamb. You have to understand a little bit about, a Jewish wedding. Well, I understand a Jewish wedding. How many of you have seen My Big Fat Greek Wedding? Okay? Or if you know any big fat Greeks, I know a few, what do you have? Party. All the families involved. Okay? So that's what this image is. It's not everybody sitting on their own little cloud going, praise Jesus, Jesus lives, Jesus is Lord, yippee. It's huge. All right? Now, something that I should have mentioned the other day about The Wanderer that completely slipped my mind for I don't think I did. Go back for a moment to lines 92 and following. The where has the horse gone? Where is the rider? Where is the giver of gold? Where are the seats of the feast? Where are the joys of the hall? Okay. All of that is called the ubi sunt motif, which simply means where are, right? It's an old Latin technique that you see in Latin literature, where the poet is essentially saying, this is how bad life is. Where are the horses? Where are the riders? Where are the lords? Where are the seats of the feast? And they're all rhetorical questions because everybody knows where they are. They aren't. That's the problem. They don't last. Okay? Jump to the Seafarer. What does he say? What is the person who's fat, dumb, and happy on land, who has plenty to drink, going to do when death comes a-knocking? If he's not prepared. Right? This is why the speaker says, I choose to go out. I choose to try the wild ways. What he's doing is he's testing himself. He's preparing himself for death. Doesn't mean he's going out and seeking death. He's not, I don't know, he's not a, rabid capitalist going and knocking on the doors of Marxism saying, come on, you and me, mano a mano. It's not like that. What he's doing is he is saying, I am going to see what I can do. I'm going to see if my spirit will fail or if I will overcome whatever the temptations, etc. are that will come as a result of this feat. Okay, that's all for the Seafarer. And I don't have anything else. I would really recommend, even though I don't have it on the syllabus, taking a look at the Wife's Lament on the next page. Sometimes I try to do this poem, for the simple reason that you ought to read it. It is one of the most enigmatic of all Old English poems. There's really only one other one that is as enigmatic, and it's called Wolf and Edwalker. Because nobody really knows what this poem's about. I mean, it sounds like it's about one thing, but there are some really far out, wild explanations of it. One person says, for example, a guy named Carl Wintersdorf, says, for example, that the speaker is a ghost. That the speaker isn't alive anymore. Kind of crazy. All right, so Thursday we're going to turn to page 31 and we're going to do the Dream of the Rood. And I will put some images up that day, I hope to, of the Rivel Cross that you see on that page. It's spelled Ruthwell, but it's pronounced Rivel, like drivel. Okay? One of, if not the greatest religious poem ever in the English language. Definitely in Anglo-Saxon. But it's not just straightforward, Jesus is Lord kind of religious. It's Christianity melded with pagan Germanic belief. Pretty cool, because Christ gets portrayed as a Germanic hero, which we'll talk about on Thursday. Okay, I'll let you go.